Sarah and I had been married for almost 18 years, and if you had asked anyone who knew us, they would have said we had it all. A nice house in the suburbs, decent jobs, and, from the outside, a stable relationship. We were that couple, the one everyone admired. Solid, reliable, even enviable. But, like many things in life, the surface doesn't tell the full story. Beneath that calm exterior, something had shifted, slowly and almost imperceptibly at first, but it had become undeniable. We hadn't had sex in nearly 2 years. The first time I realized how long it had been, it shocked me. How does that even happen? You get caught up in the routines of daily life, you put off intimacy until you feel like it, and then you just never feel like it anymore. That's how it was for us. We kissed goodbye in the morning. We shared the occasional dinner, and we still talked, but the physical part of our relationship was non-existent. The desire, at least on her part, seemed to have completely disappeared. At first, I blamed myself. I wasn't in the best shape anymore, and I was always stressed from work. I started staying up late more often, buried in meaningless tasks to distract myself from the gnawing emptiness I felt. The rejection stung, even if it was subtle. It wasn't like Sarah ever said no. She just didn't initiate, didn't respond when I tried. After a while, I stopped trying altogether. And that's when I found myself drifting into a different world. It started innocently enough. Late night browsing through random articles, scrolling through Reddit, anything to pass the time. But as the nights grew longer and more restless, I stumbled into something else. Porn had never been a huge thing for me before, but now it was a way to cope with the void. I started visiting 18-plus sites more frequently, justifying it by saying it was harmless. It wasn't like I was cheating, right? It was just a distraction. But distractions have a way of pulling you deeper. And before long, I was on those sites every night. One night, after months of this routine, I was scrolling through one of the usual 18-plus sites, letting the hours slip by as I jumped from video to video. It had become something of a ritual for me. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just another distraction from the reality that Sarah and I were growing more distant by the day. Then something unusual happened. A private message popped up on the screen. At first, I assumed it was just spam, those auto-generated messages that try to lure you into some phishing scheme. But there was something different about this one. The username wasn't a jumbled string of letters and numbers, and the message was surprisingly personal. It read, "Looking for something more? I can give you access to an exclusive site. Real women, real discretion. You won't believe what you'll find." I hesitated, my finger hovering over the delete button. It had to be a scam, right? But a darker part of me, curious, restless, was tempted. The routine had become boring, predictable. This felt different, like a chance to explore something forbidden. It was reckless, I knew that. Yet, I clicked the link anyway. The site was like nothing I'd seen before. Sleek, professional, and completely anonymous. There were no names, no faces, just masked profiles with minimal details and a promise of discretion. Every interaction came with a hefty price tag, which only added to the allure. It felt like stepping into an underworld that few had access to. I could feel my heart pounding as I scrolled through the profiles, each one more enticing than the last. And then I saw her. The profile image wasn't a full-face picture, but the woman was beautiful. Dark hair, styled into a sleek bob, a mask that covered half her face, and intense makeup that made her look both mysterious and alluring. Her bio was vague, just a few lines about her being an experienced professional who knew how to fulfill any fantasy. There was something about her that made me pause. Something familiar. I zoomed in, scrutinizing the details. The way she held herself, the shape of her lips, it stirred something in the back of my mind. My gut twisted. My hands went cold. It couldn't be. No, I was being paranoid. But the more I looked, the more I felt sick to my stomach. The woman in the photo, she looked exactly like Sarah. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. It couldn't be Sarah. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. Maybe my frustration, my loneliness, had warped my perception, making me paranoid. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself that I was overthinking it, but the feeling wouldn't go away. That face, Even with the heavy makeup and the mask, it was too similar to ignore. The same sharp cheekbones, the same curve of her lips. And then there was the birthmark, a small, nearly unnoticeable spot on her collarbone, something only someone who knew her intimately would recognize. My breath hitched. I zoomed in again, squinting at the screen. There it was, clear as day. I pushed away from my desk, feeling like the ground had just shifted beneath me. My stomach churned, and I had to fight the urge to throw up. My wife, my Sarah, an escort? No, this couldn't be happening. It felt like a cruel joke, but deep down, I knew I couldn't deny what I was seeing. The room felt stifling. I needed air, needed to get out. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, the cool night breeze hitting my face as I paced the driveway. My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and betrayal. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't I noticed? And why was she doing this? I tried to think back, to find the signs I must have missed. The business trips, the late nights at work, the gradual distance between us. All the pieces started falling into place, painting a picture I didn't want to see. I had to know more. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I spent every free moment investigating, looking into Sarah's schedule, cross-referencing her business trips with the dates listed on the escort site. My paranoia grew with each passing minute as more and more things lined up perfectly. The signs were all there. I had just been too blind, too trusting to see them. She wasn't just working for some random marketing firm. She was leading a double life. And it wasn't just the betrayal of her body. It was the lies, the deceit, the elaborate web she had spun right under my nose. I couldn't confront her yet, not without solid proof. I knew I was going down a dark path, but I couldn't stop myself. I started following her, not physically, but digitally. I tracked her flights, checked the agency's schedule, and every time, it matched. She was living this other life, and I had no idea how long it had been going on. I kept my distance, waiting for the right moment. I wasn't ready to face the truth just yet, but the more I uncovered, the angrier I became. She had been lying to me for God knows how long, and I had just sat there, oblivious. Then I had a twisted idea. I had to see her in person, not as her husband, but as one of her clients. I reached out to the agency, requesting an appointment. It was nerve-wracking. What if she recognized me? What if I couldn't go through with it? But I didn't care. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to see how far she was willing to go to maintain this charade. The agency was professional, almost eerily so. After a few emails back and forth, they confirmed the booking. The price was astronomical, but I paid it without hesitation. And then, the date was set. The room was dimly lit when I walked in, the air thick with the scent of perfume, something rich and intoxicating. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest that I was sure anyone could hear it. The mask I wore felt suffocating, but I wasn't going to take it off. The agency had been clear, complete anonymity, no faces, no names, no talking. That was the deal. She was already there, sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed in black lace lingerie that hugged every curve of her body. Her face was partially hidden behind a delicate mask, but there was no mistaking her. It was Sarah, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had shared my life with for nearly 2 decades. But standing here, in this moment, she felt like a stranger. My heart raced not just from anger or betrayal, but from something far more primal, desire. I hadn't seen her like this in years. The confidence in her movements, the way she seemed completely at ease in her own skin. It was like a switch had flipped, and I was seeing a side of her that I had never truly known. My hands clenched at my sides as I tried to control the wave of emotions flooding through me. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. That was part of the arrangement. But her body language spoke volumes. She moved toward me slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving mine. She had no idea who I was, yet her gaze was filled with the kind of raw, unapologetic desire that we hadn't shared in years. And then, she touched me. Just the lightest brush of her fingertips against my chest, but it sent a jolt through my entire body. I was already hard, harder than I had been in years. My body responded instantly, betraying the conflict raging in my mind. I hated her for what she had done, for the lies, for the betrayal, but at that moment, I wanted her more than I ever had. She pushed me gently toward the bed, her hands moving with a practiced, sensual grace. My breath hitched as she pressed herself against me, her lips grazing my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. I could feel every inch of her through the thin fabric of her lingerie, her warmth, the softness of her skin. My erection throbbed painfully, straining against my pants, desperate for release. Sarah, or whoever she was in this moment, pulled back just enough to start undressing me. She was slow, methodical, like she had done this 1,000 times before. Her fingers traced the edge of my shirt, her touch electrifying. My hands trembled as I let her take control, too overwhelmed by the intensity of it all to resist. When she finally had me naked, she paused for a moment, her eyes lingering on me before she reached down and touched me. I couldn't hold back the groan that escaped my throat. It was pure instinct, raw and unfiltered. My dick was rock hard, pulsing with every beat of my heart. She wrapped her fingers around me, her touch firm yet teasing, and I thought I might lose control right then and there. We hadn't been like this in so long. Years, maybe more, and the feeling of her hand on me, stroking me, was almost too much. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as she guided me toward the bed, pushing me down onto the mattress. Her eyes were dark with desire, and the tension between us crackled like electricity. Without a word, she straddled me, her body moving with the kind of confidence that only comes from experience. She positioned herself over me, her warmth hovering just above my throbbing erection, teasing me with the promise of what was to come. I could feel the heat of her body, so close, yet agonizingly out of reach. When she finally lowered herself onto me, I felt like I might explode. The sensation of being inside her after so long, the tightness, the heat, it was overwhelming. I gripped the sheets, my body tensing as she began to move, slow at first, her hips rolling in a rhythm that felt almost too perfect. It was like she knew exactly what I needed, what would push me over the edge. I had never felt anything like it. She rode me with a passion we had never shared before, her body moving with an intensity that drove me wild. I could barely think, could barely breathe. Every thrust sent shockwaves of pleasure through me, and all I could do was hold on, my hands gripping her hips as she took control. My erection was impossibly hard, harder than I thought was even possible for me at this point in my life. I couldn't believe how my body was reacting to her, to this moment. It was like every nerve ending was on fire, my entire being consumed by the feeling of her on top of me, around me, pulling me deeper into her with every movement. And the worst part? I loved it. I loved every second of it. The betrayal, the lies, all of it faded into the background as my world narrowed to this moment, to the sensation of her body against mine. We had never fucked like this before. Not even close. My pulse raced, my body trembling with the force of my arousal. I couldn't hold back any longer. I exploded inside her, my release so intense that it left me gasping for air, my body convulsing with the aftershocks of pleasure. For a moment, everything was still. The room was silent except for the sound of our ragged breathing. She slid off of me and lay beside me, her hand resting on my chest, her breath still heavy. We didn't speak. There were no words, no confessions, just the lingering intensity of what had just happened. I lay there, my mind racing, my body still humming with the afterglow of the most intense sex I had ever had. But beneath it all, the confusion, the anger, the betrayal, they were still there, simmering just below the surface. I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened, about her, about us, and I had no idea what to do next. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling her body still warm beside me, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything. I had just slept with my wife. I had paid to sleep with her, like some kind of twisted transaction. She was working as an escort. She had lied to me, had betrayed me. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't I seen it before? The thoughts bounced around in my head, but no matter how much I tried to focus on the betrayal, I kept coming back to the sex. It was dirty, raw, and so intensely sexual that I couldn't get it out of my mind. I tried to push it away, to focus on the fact that she had been lying to me for God knows how long. But instead, I kept replaying it in my head. The way her body had felt on top of me, the way she moved with such confidence, such expertise. It was unlike anything we had ever shared in all our years of marriage. Her skin had been so soft, her touch so electric. The way she had taken control, riding me with a passion I had never known from her. It was like she had become someone else entirely, someone who knew exactly how to push every button, how to make me lose control. And as much as I hated myself for it, my body was reacting. I could feel myself getting hard again, my erection already straining against the sheets, despite everything I was feeling inside. It was insane. How could I even want her after everything? After knowing what she had done? But my body wasn't listening. It didn't care about the lies, the deceit, or the fact that our entire marriage had been a facade. All it could think about was the way she had made me feel just moments ago. The way she had taken me to places we had never gone before, had made me feel things I didn't even know I was capable of feeling anymore. It was like a drug. The more I thought about it, the more I craved it. I remembered the way her body had fit perfectly against mine, the heat between us, the intoxicating scent of her skin. I remembered the way her hips had moved, slow at first, teasing, then faster, harder, until I couldn't hold back anymore. The way she had moaned, low and throaty, like she knew exactly what she was doing to me. It was dirty. It was wrong. But it had been the best sex of my life. And no matter how much I tried to focus on my anger, on the betrayal, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I shifted in bed, trying to get comfortable, but my body was already betraying me again. My dick was hard, rock hard, like it hadn't been in years. I could still feel the lingering heat from her body. The way she had gripped me, pulled me deeper into her. Every time I thought about it, I felt another jolt of arousal shoot through me, making it impossible to think about anything else. I wanted her. Even now, after everything, I wanted her again. And that realization hit me harder than anything else. The fact that, despite the lies, despite the betrayal, I still wanted her. My wife. The woman who had been leading a double life, who had been sleeping with other men, who had lied to my face for years. I felt disgusted with myself, but at the same time, I couldn't deny it. My dick was throbbing, painfully hard, and all I could think about was the way it had felt to be inside her. The way she had made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in so long. How could I ever look her in the eye again? How could I confront her about this, knowing that part of me loved it, that part of me was already craving more? It didn't make sense. None of it did. But in that moment, lying there in the darkness, my body buzzing with arousal, I couldn't think about anything else. The shame, the guilt, the anger, they were all there, bubbling beneath the surface. But the desire, the raw, primal need, that was overwhelming everything else. My heart raced as I tried to calm myself, tried to make sense of it all, but all I could think about was her body, the way she had felt, the way she had fucked me like no one else ever had. I was trapped in this twisted loop, caught between the betrayal and the desire, between the pain and the pleasure. And the worst part? I wasn't sure which one would win. I spent the next few days in a haze, replaying that night over and over in my mind. Every time I tried to focus on the betrayal, on the fact that Sarah had been lying to me for God knows how long, I found myself drawn back to the raw, visceral passion we had shared. It was wrong, twisted even, but I couldn't deny it. That was the best sex we'd ever had. But as much as I tried to bury the anger under the memories of her body, the reality was too stark to ignore. My wife, my Sarah, had been living a double life. She had deceived me, humiliated me, and I couldn't just let it slide. I needed answers. I needed to know why. And more than that, I needed her to see what she had done to us. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, my hands shaking. Sarah was coming home from another one of her business trips. I knew the truth now, knew what her trips really were. I was done pretending. I was done playing the fool. When she walked in, all smiles and small talk, it took everything in me not to explode right then and there. She dropped her bag by the door and gave me that same tired look she always gave after her trips. The look that used to make me think she was just exhausted from work. But now it made me sick. "Sarah," I said, my voice low, "we need to talk." She paused, sensing the change in my tone, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? It didn't matter. She sat down across from me, her hands resting casually on the table, as if nothing was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice too calm, too controlled. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know about the escort work. I know about everything." Her face went pale, and for a second, I thought she might deny it, might try to weave some elaborate lie. But instead, she just stared at me, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. There was no point in denying it. She knew I had seen too much. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "How long have you been doing this?" Sarah looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "It's not what you think," she finally said, her voice soft. I needed something. We've been drifting apart for years. You know that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So this is my fault?" I snapped. "You're blaming me because you decided to sleep with strangers for money?" "It wasn't about the money," she said quickly, her voice shaking now. I felt alive again. I felt desired. I didn't want to hurt you, but you did," I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "You hurt me more than you can imagine." She was silent, her eyes full of guilt, but there was something else there too, defiance. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. Not really. I stood up from the table, unable to sit still any longer. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the weight of everything suffocating. "You could have talked to me," I said, pacing the floor. "You could have told me how you felt, instead of sneaking around behind my back, lying to me." Sarah finally stood, moving toward me with that same calculated grace I had seen in the hotel room. "I didn't think you'd understand," she said, her voice lower now. "You stopped wanting me. You stopped touching me. I needed more." I turned to face her, my chest heaving with a mix of anger and confusion. "And you thought fucking other men was the answer?" "I didn't expect you to find out," she said coldly. "And for what it's worth, I thought you were done with me." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. Done with her? I had given her my life, my trust, and she had thrown it away like it meant nothing. But even now, with my mind reeling, I couldn't shake the memory of that night, the way she had made me feel, the raw power of it, the need. I stepped closer, feeling that same pull toward her, my desire fighting against my rage. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice steady. "That was the best sex we've ever had." She blinked, her eyes widening as she realized where this was going. "I'm not letting you off the hook that easily," I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. "Prepare yourself, Sarah, because I'm going to call that agency again. And the next time I see you, you're going to work, and you're going to give me everything you've been giving to those other men." Her face went pale, but I didn't stop. "You're right," I said, my voice full of venom. "I didn't see you for what you've become, but now I do. And if this is what you want, if this is who you are, then fine. But you'll be working for me." I grabbed my jacket, the finality of my decision hitting me like a wave. This was it. I couldn't live in this twisted cycle any longer. As much as I wanted her, as much as my body craved her, I couldn't let this go on. It would destroy me. Sarah stood frozen, her lips parted as if she was going to say something, but no words came. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew I was serious. I walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned to face her one last time, my voice steady, my decision clear. "That was the best sex of my life," I said coldly. "And if you want to keep working, go ahead. But I'm done. I'll find someone who doesn't need to hide behind masks and lies to want me." She didn't respond. She couldn't. I opened the door, stepped outside into the cold night air, and breathed in deeply. For the first time in years, I felt free. The weight of her lies, her betrayal, they didn't control me anymore. I had finally taken back control. As I walked down the driveway, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Sarah had made her choices, and now I was making mine.